All right.
I think if we're going to get started with introductions, we could go ahead and begin. And then as people are still joining, we'll add them in.
All right. Then let's start to my left, right there up on top is Janine Decker, who is joining us. Thank you for joining us, Janine, from your family's California home.
Yes, my temporary California home. I'm Janine Decker, formerly in human resources, but now happily retired, and a seroptimist for many, many years.
And then Shelley Cutts. Oh, Rocky Creaser. It says Shelley Cutts, Rocky Creaser's computer.
I know, I see my name on it with it, so maybe it's because we're in the same neighborhood, Shelley. Who knows?
I think we put it on there for a meeting we had, either like a fall meeting or something. We were both at your house.
Yeah, or yeah, and you were presenting. Yep, I think that's what it was. So, hello, I'm Rocky Creaser. I am I was in education. And as Janine says, I'm happily retired, but I'm sure as Janine would say, I'm busier now than when I was working, and I didn't think that would be possible. So I am currently the membership chair, and I've been a member of Seroptimist for over 20 years.
Thank you, Rocky. And then Tammy Zeller.
Yes, I'm Tammy Zeller, a Seroptimist for 7 years, and I am a leader in underwriting at State Farm Insurance.
And Lee Wales.
Hi, everybody. Formerly director at Bull Information Systems and then a development officer with Valley of the Sun United Way. And I think I've been a seroptimist for about 20 years. Nice to see everybody.
Good to see you, Lee. Joan Burke.
Unmute. I'm Joan Burke, and I'm not a member. I'm an interested guest, and I am a lawyer. I practice telecommunications law. I represent telephone carriers. So if you ever have trouble with your telephone bill, give me a call. Very narrow, and I'm happy to be here.
Glad to have you join us, Joan. Tara Whitehead.
Hello, ladies. My name is Tara Whitehead. I'm an education coach and an accountant executive in the debt settlement industry, and I've been in Seroptimist for just over a year.
Thank you, Tara. Margie Burke.
So Margie Burke, I'm the Golden West Region Governor-elect. I'm also the Chief Finance and Operating Officer at the Desert Botanical Garden, and I have been a Seroptimist for almost 22 years now.
Thank you, Margie. Our most recent new member, Cindy Hayes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Hayes. I am currently a realtor with Arizona Best Real Estate. I've been a realtor in Arizona for a little over 20 years. I used to live in Huntington Beach for a few years, so I was part of the Seroptimist of Huntington Beach, and just joined the Phoenix chapter here this last month. So I'm looking forward to it.
Glad to have you here too. And I better introduce myself then before I turn it over to my co-president, our co-president, Lisa Farrar. I'm Henrietta Speedy, former CFO for Engineering Services, now retired. And Lisa Farrar, who will then introduce Shelley, who will then introduce our speaker.
Yep. I'm Lisa Farrar. I'm Henrietta's co-president this year, and retired mortgage banker and fitness club owner. And Margie, I was at the Desert Botanical Gardens this morning, first thing, and oh my goodness, if you all haven't been, the cactus are starting to bloom, and
everything is blooming.
Gorgeous.
Yes.
Absolutely gorgeous. So I will turn it over to our esteemed President-elect Shelley Cutts to introduce our speaker today. And Lisa, we're very excited to have you here. So welcome to all of our guests as well.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm Shelley Cutts. I've been a Seroptimist for about close to 15 years now. I'm president-elect of Seroptimist International in Phoenix, and I am a unit chief counsel for the environmental enforcement section of the Attorney General's office. Also a longtime member of Desert Botanical Garden, and took my 3-year-old granddaughter Piper to the garden on Sunday, and she loves loves all the blooming flowers. And she also checked out the butterfly exhibit, and a butterfly landed on her finger, and it made her the happiest 3-year-old kid you're ever going to see in the world. So if you have any littles in your family, I totally recommend taking them down to the garden, especially in the morning before it gets too hot. So, and let them check out the butterflies and all the flowers.
All right, since
So-
you did all a plug, I have
Oh,
passes. So if anyone is not a
Woo.
member and would like to experience the garden, I need your name and where you want me to send passes. So doing some outreach with Seroptimus. So
yeah,
thank
and
you
then
for my
become a member
shameless
of the
plug.
garden.
My shameless plug, but I have passes.
And after you go with the VIP pass, become a member of the garden and help support them. It's a great organization. So I am really happy that we have Lisa Glow here, who's CEO of CAS, and she's going to be talking to us today about Project Haven, and I guess other things or anything else going on at CAS, Central Arizona Shelter Services, that she would like to share. So take it away, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me. So my background is I practiced law for 10 or 15 years, and both in California, here in Arizona. I'm originally from Sierra Vista, Arizona. And then I went and worked for Janet Napolitano when she was the Attorney General, and then when she was governor, and did a lot of policy and community work, which is where I really discovered I love nonprofit and community development, and I know how to raise money. So I ended up in the nonprofit sector after working with Janet Napolitano. I ran an autism center for a few years, then I consulted for 9 years. I've been in this job for 5 years, and this is the most challenging job of my career because of the magnitude and complexity of what we're facing with homelessness and housing. So let me, Shelley, how long, I could talk for like 10 minutes and then open for questions, or what is your?
Yeah, you can take up to 20 or 30 minutes if you
Okay.
want. So,
Okay.
and yes, normally at the end, we leave a little time for questions.
Yeah, okay, I'll leave plenty of time. We have a homeless and housing crisis across our nation, and you have been reading about this. So this has been coming for years. It's something we didn't plan for very well, and now we're at crisis levels. Recently, the data on Maricopa County, which is where CAS is located, was released on what's called the point in time count, and it showed a very large increase in what's the unsheltered count, people who can't get into a shelter. And it's an undercount, but they counted 5,000 people in Maricopa County sleeping on the streets. And it's probably 2 or 3 times that, because there are people, they might not be found that night. They might be staying on a couch, but they're still unsheltered. They're somewhere for a night. They might have a hotel room for the night. That was a 35% increase over the last 2 years. It's a crisis. We have where CAS's main shelter is located in downtown Phoenix. If you've driven down on Jefferson, there's over 1,000 people sleeping on the streets outside of here. It's the largest encampment currently in the nation. There was just some reporting on that. And people are dying in those tents, and people don't have the sanitation. They don't have what they need. We don't have enough shelter beds either. So we don't know what the numbers are on the sheltered number count yet. It's probably, I'm guessing, around 4,500. And I'm just talking about Maricopa County. And Maricopa County holds 70% of our homeless population. The reason we have a crisis is complex, but housing is a key factor. Across the state of Arizona, we need more than 250,000 units of affordable housing, which don't exist. So we had that before we had the rent crisis. Last year, rents in Maricopa County went up 30%. And Maricopa County, I think, is the fastest growing county in the nation as well. So rising rents, 30% increases, is resulting in a lot of people who are becoming homeless for the first time. And we know this to be true, and we don't have the housing, and more people are going to become homeless. So what we do here at CAS is we provide emergency shelter. So that's when people are just coming off the streets generally, although they may have just been evicted and not on the streets and come here. We run the state's largest adult emergency shelter, and we're going to be scaling that up. Currently, every night we have 520 people, adults 18 and older, who stay at our shelter, and they're in large dorm style rooms. So you have 100 people here, 80 there. Not the most ideal, and that model will change in the future, but it's been the model we've had for a long time. By June, we're going to have 600 people staying at our shelter. We're bringing in more bunk beds. So we'll have 80 more people. So we'll have 600. We're understaffed like many people across the country, many industries. So those are the challenges we're facing at this particular shelter that we're adding to and renovating. We have a family shelter in Sunny Slope, and we can take up to about 150 family members there nightly. It's 30 apartment units, depending on the size of the family. It depends on how many people we have there nightly, but we've had as many as 150. We average maybe 100, 120. In the homeless population for decades, it's been true that adults are the largest percentage of people homeless, but we also have more families becoming homeless. We've been doing better with families, and the pandemic has increased the number of families becoming homeless. We were doing better with veterans, but it's going back up. So we track all that data and watch the trends, and things are just not going in the right direction. I'll tell you what some of the good news is in a minute. But a population that is growing in numbers, and I have been on a mission since I started here 5 years ago, is the senior population who are becoming homeless for the first time. People 55 and older is how we're categorizing that. And there's national research that's been there for 5 years where they've been saying, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. Well, it's here. And in our 520 bed shelter, over 32% of the people every night are over the age of 55, 60s, 70s, 80s, even people in their 90s. And their needs are different. Some of them have cognitive decline, many of them, physical, chronic health issues, fixed incomes of about $800 a month. So you can see why this is a problem. We call it the silver tsunami of the homeless. And we have been working on developing expertise for the last few years with a specially trained team to work with them to provide more screening, connect them to more resources, because we weren't paying enough attention. So that has been a huge priority for us. And during the pandemic, we were able to open a separate shelter to get seniors and highly medically vulnerable people out of this shelter, because the pandemic, when you have hundreds of people staying in the same room and they're elderly with chronic health issues, it's a recipe for a lot of problems. So we opened a hotel in North Phoenix for 15 months. It was funded through the CARES Act, federal money. Phoenix gave us the funding, and we had 100 rooms there, 16th Street and Northern, a Best Western. And no problems with the neighborhood. And these senior citizens, it was literally life-saving. And we also had some people who were, stage 4 cancer, who were in the homeless system like that, we were able to keep there. So pretty dire situation, but having that really helped us probably save lives of those elderly folks. Then we decided we were going to pivot and try to get a hotel, which is where Project Haven comes in. Shelley mentioned that. We decided we were going to buy a hotel for seniors and open a separate senior shelter. So I'm happy to report we now own a hotel that's off of the I-17. It's the Old Phoenix Inn, and north of Northern off of the I-17. We closed on the purchase of that hotel on December 1st, and we're undertaking renovations now. And when it's open, which we're pushing as fast as we can, it will be exclusively for seniors. 170 seniors can stay there nightly, and they'll have all the other services we provide. So that's one of the bright spots for us. And we're not the only ones going into the hotel for the homeless business. That's happening all over the country. It's happening here in our county. Mesa's buying a hotel, Tempe's bought some hotels, Tucson's doing some things. So it's a way to buy these old dilapidated hotels with all this federal pandemic money. So that's a silver lining. We had money to do stuff with and get more people off the streets more quickly. So that would be Project Haven, and hopefully you'll hear more about that in the news when that opens. One of the great things that happened with that is we had neighborhood support. So we all know NIMBYism is a challenge when you're trying to open a homeless shelter, but the neighbors wanted us there. And the reason they wanted us there is that hotel had been used as a temporary hotel for homeless individuals with COVID. And crime went down in the area, and the neighbors were like, we like the idea of this becoming a shelter. And plus with the senior population, they saw what we were doing at our Best Western Hotel, and they're like, we can buy into this. So it was like a perfect storm opportunity. So, you know, that to me is a huge blessing that we're going to have that. And others will be opening as well throughout the community. We also, during the pandemic, faced great challenges, given what we had going on here with these large dorm areas of people. And so we had to come together and put protocols and policies in place and find partners to test our clients and vaccinate. And it was, I can't even believe, like, I look back at how we managed through that. But across the country, the homeless population actually fared better than we would have expected in terms of the transmission of COVID. It just wasn't happening as much. They speculated because people were outdoors a lot, or I don't know what it was. So we did not have a huge amount of deaths from COVID with the population that we serve. So that's a little bit of a silver lining, but it was difficult. It was hard. It was hard to keep people safe. We had to decrease our numbers at our large shelter because you just couldn't have that many people bumping into each other and keep them safe. The other thing we did during the pandemic is we opened up a facility in Glendale, and it's called the Norton and Ramsey Social Justice Empowerment Center. Do any of you live in Glendale or the West Valley? It's a new navigation center, and it's not shelter, but it's a walk-in center where we help about 500 people every month, whether they need housing assistance, eviction prevention, vocational training, are connecting to another provider. We have a 24/7 line, and that was through a large CARES Act grant. So the pandemic got the cities and the state and government really into action for the homeless population. So we have this influx of money coming under the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan, and we have this increase in homelessness, plus the fact that unhoused people during a pandemic need the attention of government. So people came together in a whole new way for the population we serve. And now we're coming together to have to address an even bigger housing and rent crisis. So I thought we'd slow down, but we're just speeding up more and more and more. The last thing I'm going to say, I mentioned a little bit, well, no, I'm going to say two more things. I'm going to talk about who we serve, and then also some of the inequities around homelessness, and then open it up so I speak about the things you're interested in. So at CAS, we serve anybody who shows up, who's 18 and older at our adults shelter, and who gets into the system who needs a bed. So we have veterans, seniors, youth, which is defined as 18 to 23, families at our other shelter, people with disabilities. We see people who are low income with disabilities, people with intellectual disabilities, people with severe mental illness, people with substance abuse. And we aren't equipped to address all those needs. The system has never been properly funded to address those needs. So people, low income workers, 25% of our people are working, but they can't afford a place to live. So when I mentioned earlier that I think these large shelter models are not the future, because it's not really solving the crisis, the movement across our county and where we're going to is to work on getting smaller regional shelters that are specialized. Our first is for seniors, Project Haven. We're going to partner with, or we are partnering with another agency. We're getting an award to open a shelter for 70 people with serious mental illness. Right now, they're mixed in with 520 other people without sufficient resources to address their needs. So that's 70. And then maybe we'll do a workforce hotel. It's a big push, but all of us are pushing forward, and that would be a better model to address the needs of people. Just warehousing people without sufficient resources. Are we getting them off the streets? Yes. Are we doing our best by them? No. So we're trying to transform to a better model to serve people. So let me pause there and see what kind of questions or areas I haven't covered or what you want to hear more about.
So thank you, Lisa. I think I have maybe a couple of questions to kick off the discussion, and then I suppose we can open it up for those who want to do the little hand raise if they have questions. So just a couple of things. One, the funding that you talked about that you received from the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan, are funding for CASA's programs, is that funding going to be sustainable when the funding you get from those laws expire? So that's kind of like one question. Two, are you finding that the Phoenix VA is being a helpful partner to you and your clients with things like the HUD-VASH programs for housing vouchers and other things? And then thirdly, you know, how can we help, right? How can we help as residents of Maricopa County? What can we do to help solve these problems?
Thank you. Yes, sustainability is a big issue. CAS is about 50% government funded, 50% private. So we have a fundraising department and we're a charitable tax credit agency, and you can give a charitable tax credit to CAS and it's something you get back on your taxes. You can do it up to April 15th. And so we're all facing that question. So last year, I think we had over 17 million in CARES Act and American Rescue Plan. Now, 11 million of that is for the hotel, the purchase and the renovations. 5 million was to run the temporary Best Western. But then we had more housing dollars and things that we do need. So here's what we're doing, a couple of things at CAS. We're now an access provider, figuring out the billing to be able to bill for a lot of the services we provide. We provide shelter here, but we do case management one-on-one with people, and a lot of that could be billable. We just haven't figured it out yet. And we're not the only ones in the system that haven't. So that will give us diversification. We do housing navigation, we do life skills. So as we become a Medicaid provider under the access programs, we'll be able to diversify our revenue for a portion of our funding. The other thing that we're doing, and I'm particularly proactive, is at our state legislature, because the state has not put a lot of funding into homelessness through the years. And we need more in housing. So there's 2 bills, well, really 3 bills running right now that we're supporting. One is a relatively small amount of new funding for homeless services statewide, and that goes through the lottery. So it takes 1 million and puts it to 3 million. That's statewide distribution. I would have liked 20 million, but we'll work on it again next year. So that bill is moving. The other 2 bills are very large bills. One is 100 million, one is 50 million, and it's taking American Rescue Plan money. And the beauty of this, it's being led bipartisan by a Republican, David Livingston, who I've built a great relationship with over the years. And you have to have the Republican leadership working with the Democratic leadership to get any of this funding done and put the pressure on the governor. So 100 million will go to the Housing Trust Fund to build new housing. It won't happen fast enough. You can't build the housing fast enough to fill that 250,000 unit gap. And then 50 million would go to something that's generated a bit of controversy, but I support it as long as we're fixing the language on the bill. So 50 million would go to street outreach teams, because as you have more people on the streets, you need to outreach and connect with them to help them come off the streets. And part of the funding would go to build tiny homes or structured sort of campsites so people have potable water and security and case management. The reason it's generating controversy, if any of you have read about some of what's going on in New York and LA and other places, is it's being called the anti-camping bill. And there's a case out of Boise says you can't put people in jail for being homeless, which I agree. You can't put them in jail for being homeless. And that was happening in Boise. This bill doesn't do that exactly, but the risk would be there. So the language is being fixed. But that's Senate Bill 1581. Watch for that as it comes out. That $50 million would help us with some of the cliff that's coming. But it's specifically to deal with the unsheltered folks. So those 100 people in tents out here would be given an option to go somewhere where there's support, where they have toilets, where they have case management, but you can't force people to go. So those are some of the pieces happening. And then we have to keep pressure on the state to put more funding into homeless services. It's never been there. The cities are the biggest funders and the county. And I think they're gonna up the funding they're doing, because as I said, people are really concerned now at the table saying we have to address this. So I think more money will flow from both the cities and the counties as well. The second question about veterans, and yeah, we do work well with them. There are a lot of HUD-VASH vouchers that aren't used, so CAS, we tend to serve veterans who may not qualify for those services. They military service, but they don't qualify because of their discharge or whatever. So it's harder to get them back into housing. We don't have enough housing. That's the typical problem. We'll have people and can't get them back into housing. So they kind of linger in the system, but we do work well with the VA. There are other nonprofits like US Vets and others that work more specifically with the veteran population, and then something called the CRRC that works with our homeless vets too, the community, I forget what it's called. I forget what the abbreviation. And then ways you can help is helping spread the word about what's going on around the truth about who's becoming homeless, speaking up in favor of actions that you agree with. We would not have been able to get that hotel for seniors if the neighbors hadn't supported it. They came to the table at our zoning hearing and they were in support, but we worked closely with them. We're not going to solve the problem unless we open more places throughout our regions. And there's a lot of fear anytime you hear about a homeless shelter and individuals and coming into a neighborhood. But I think becoming a neighborhood advocate and really educating yourself on the challenges or on the issues and helping with solutions. We need lots of folks in that arena. And then if you want to make a charitable tax credit donation, that helps us too.
Thank you. So I'll look to see if anyone has their little hand raised. Is that how Zoom does it? Do you have the little hand? Oh, Lisa, go ahead. You have your actual hand up.
Thanks, Shelley. Question for you, Lisa. And you speak about becoming an advocate and speaking the truth about what's really happening with the homeless population. There's a lot of discussion, or you hear a lot about the percentage of the homeless population that don't desire to be in a shelter. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that? And are there any statistics on what that percentage is?
Yeah. So, right, there are people who aren't ready to come into shelter who might choose they want to stay remaining in an encampment or want a different option. I've talked to individuals who say they're seriously mentally ill and they don't feel comfortable sleeping in a room with 120 other people, which I get that. So we have to have better options and solutions for people. I don't know that there's a statistic on that, but I do know, like, repeated interaction with people, there are a lot of people who want help, and you have to have enough bodies to go and support those folks. At this encampment out here, there was a reporter here not long ago from Vice News, and she talked to a lot of people there and did her story. And there are people sleeping in their cars, first-time homeless. They're working and they can't afford to pay their rent anymore. So I think it's important to share that that is a reality. We have so many barriers to people remaining housed. We have no rent control in our state. It's prohibited by state law. Cities can't do that. We don't have affordable set-asides, although I think the cities are working on that. I think we need people to advocate for affordable housing and demand it from our elected officials. It's going to be a lot harder to change the state laws, but at the local level, there's a lot of action. So where you can weigh in, if you see the city council doing something and you can weigh in support of housing for people, that's going to start to put a dent in this. Not fast enough, but we got to turn it around. We got into this huge mess because of poor planning, and now we got to start turning it around. There are people who are doing drugs and in the encampments, and there needs to be a lot more outreach to those encampments to get people into treatment. And where we're going to see controversy, and I suspect we'll start to read about it in our papers soon. We're seeing in New York and LA, New York's mayor, I think it was last week, he's a liberal, ordered homeless encampment sweeps. The governor of California is wanting to put something in legislation that would get people off the streets with mental health issues, like make them come off the streets. And then what you'll hear from I'm going to the left now, I'm a liberal, but I'm more of a moderate. You'll hear people objecting, saying you should let people be wherever they want. Well, I don't think we can continue on that pathway, because people are sleeping in front yards and on sidewalks and it's very out of control, and neighbors are up in arms. So I'm kind of going down another pathway, but I think speaking up for housing and good solutions for people, we're going to see the same kind of stuff we're seeing in New York and LA coming our way in terms of government reaction. I really think that's going to happen soon.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, Tammy, Lee had her hand raised. Is that okay? And then you
Yeah,
can,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
I think I used the yellow hand, so.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, you've got a yellow hand. Go
Okay, so
first,
we'll go
Tammy,
with
go for
Tammy
it.
and then we'll go with Lee. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Lisa, so my question is this. I'm really interested in, you talked about their special programs in place and strategies to help kind of solve the problem for some of these. I'm so interested in hearing about those strategies and maybe some success stories, because
Yes.
as you mentioned, you can't sustain this.
Mm-hmm. So the Maricopa Association of Governments actually did a regional plan on homelessness and took tons of input, and that's a good plan. That's something you can look at. City of Phoenix has a homeless plan. They also have a housing plan, and they put that together before Maricopa Association of Governments did theirs. So the strategies within that I mentioned briefly, one of them is to regionalize, because homelessness, people want to stay in their communities. Encampments are all over the place. They're not going to all come to one location. So regional solutions, smaller specialized shelters, more housing. So the MAG plan is one to look at, the City of Phoenix plan, and then all the cities are getting plans in place. Like I said, there's a lot of attention right now. We don't have a state plan, we need one, but I'm confident our director of the Department of Housing, he's really good. He's been in the role for maybe a year now. He'll get one in place. And I'm with you. You got to have a plan. You have to, be working in a direction together. Yeah.
Lee.
Hi, Lisa. Would you
Hi.
tell Amy Schwabenlinder I said hi?
I will.
Yeah, I used to work with her at
Nice.
United Way. She is something. I'm
Yes.
so glad she's there.
Yep.
She's amazing. I was thinking about the hotel, the one, I think it's at Phoenix Inn, I-17,
Mm-hmm.
for seniors, which I think is so needed. I'm so glad it's going to happen. How long can someone stay there? And then are they kind of guided to somewhere else that might be more permanent?
Yes, that is the idea. So it's emergency shelter. So average length of stay we would suspect is going to be around 90 days. So we have a policy, but we don't kick them out at 90 days. They need to be working on a housing plan. Our job is tricky because we can't force people to take services, but we engage them and we say, we need to see you in action. Once you get a hotel room, you got to be in action. I think the seniors will probably end up staying longer. They stay longer than other adults who stay with us at our main shelter. So they may stay 120, 150 days. The kind of cool thing about this hotel to housing model that's all across the country is we're looking at these places as being converted to permanent housing 5 years from now. So the federal money we got to buy the hotel with, we have to use it for emergency for 5 years, and then we can convert it, maybe make it cheap housing for people because there's not enough. So then we'd have, the people who just, maybe they pay $200 a month and they have a permanent place to live. So
one of the most wonderful places I ever visited was a permanent supportive housing location. It's on, I think it's on Indian School near 7th Street for VA. It's incredible how they put that together, thinking about everything, you know, someone coming in from the street, how they've lived, what they need, the way it was so thought out. And we don't think about it that way because those of us who live in homes, have always lived in homes, can't maybe appreciate what it's like when you're going from living outdoors or in a tent or in your car, and the things you've had to do, and now you're moving into someplace else, and especially their mental issues and those kinds of things. I was so impressed. It was amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some great ones out there. I don't know if that's Arizona Housing Inc. or Native American Connections or UMOM. They run permanent supported housing, and permanent supported housing, typically that's for someone who has been chronically homeless or has mental health challenges, and they're going to need permanent support. They pay for rent, it's at a good rate, and it's in a community, a supportive community.
Right.
They don't always have enough on-site support services because of funding, but you're right, it's a better model, and we don't have enough of those places either. Yeah, if we had more affordable housing, less people would become homeless. If we had rent controls, less people would become homeless, but we don't have any of that. So yeah.
So it sounds like, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Okay, I want to go back to the affordable housing issue again. My background is in mortgage banking, and I actually did a lot of affordable housing over the years. What are you currently doing today? I know you mentioned that we don't have any initiatives for that right now in the state of Arizona, which I'm sure a lot of states don't. What actions are being taken today to try, and I know you're doing a ton to create the visibility for the need, but specifically with those who are in a position to put that in place or find funding for it, or whatever the case may be.
So the State Department of Housing has its LIHTC, low income tax credit programs. We're not a LIHTC provider, and there is more housing being built that way. One of the challenges at the state level is, I worked for Governor Napolitano back in the day, and she put a lot of money into the Housing Trust Fund to build these projects. And then during the recession in 2008, was it?
Yeah, that's when it started.
So the state legislature took that funding and capped it at $2.5 million. So you have 40-50 million a year, you go to 2.5, so you can't build as much housing. And advocates, the Housing Coalition being the lead one, and we support it, have been trying to get more money restored to that. And it still hasn't happened. There was a one-time influx a couple of years ago. The 100 million I mentioned, if it goes this year, and if the governor supports the American Rescue Plan money for that, would help us build more housing. So we really need that. And there's bipartisan support, but then the governor can say, no, it's my ARPA money, never mind. So there's going to have to be a huge advocacy effort to get that to happen. So that's one piece of it. The cities are doing things, and I'm not as much of a housing expert in terms of what they're doing to make it easier to develop projects, but there's a lot going on in the various housing departments of the cities and the county as well to get more housing built.
Okay,
The city of Phoenix has a housing plan that lays out a lot of that strategy.
Okay.
So Lisa, it seems like a lot of things that can be done that are sort of the obvious type things, like rent control, for example, have been preempted by the Arizona legislature. So how big of legislative preemption or super preemption do you think the problem is in terms of housing? Because it seems as though when you have a municipality that wants to be innovative and think outside the box and do something, you can get the, I don't know, blue dot in a red state phenomenon, right? And have the legislature preempt, preempt the city from acting. And if the city moves forward, there's a law in Arizona that says they can lose all of their state shared funding unless they come back into compliance. So I've seen preemption be damaging in many ways to municipalities, but do you see that coming into play with housing and homelessness solutions, or not really?
I think it depends on who our next governor is. I think if Katie Hobbs is elected, I think we'd have a better shot at doing some of this. When I worked for Napolitano, there were things we were able to do because the governor could say, I want that, or you're not getting that. So, and I think the other candidate, it'll probably, I don't know who the Republican will be, probably though, what's her name? Sorry, Carrie Lake. So the fact that there's a lot of bipartisan effort this year at the legislature, we're going to keep working with the other advocates in the Housing Coalition to try to put this on the table. No one's even tried to, well, that's not true. There have been some young, new Democratic legislators who've tried, and those things go nowhere on rent control. So I think we have to try again. And the creative things the cities are doing in their housing plans, I think can help too. But I really feel like if we had rent control, we wouldn't have all these people that are getting evicted. Evictions are up again. Our eviction laws are super easy to, for the landlords. And there's some effort to change that. There's a group that has a bill that we're supporting, this wildfire group, that would at least eliminate one little piece of it in terms of getting it off someone's record so they can get back into housing. There's all these complexities, and then the Arizona Multi-Housing Association would not want to see rent control, and the lobbies would kick in, but so no one's trying. So maybe there's a compromise. I don't know. Yeah.
Henrietta, you have your hand raised.
Quick question. Medical care has got to be a real challenge. Do you have a regular staff that's there all the time, or volunteers, or how do you handle that?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. So our adult shelter is located on the Human Services campus, and Amy Schwabenländer, whose name was mentioned, she's the executive director for that. So here on the campus, there's Circle the City, and they are the health clinic. So free medical care happens there. And they also have 50 respite beds. So someone who is in need of medical care and homeless can stay in one of those beds if they have one open. They have 100 somewhere else too. At our shelter, we have some what we call hospital drop-off beds, and they're really more recuperative care. We have a contract with Valleywise Hospital. So when someone's released from the hospital and they're homeless, they can get a bed there. But there are people falling through the cracks all the time. We do not provide medical care, but we partner with Circle the City. We also aren't supposed to, under our rules that we've set up, be providing people with assisting them with daily living, lifting them for the toilets and that kind of thing. We're not set up to do that, but sometimes we end up doing that. Because how do you turn someone away when they need shelter? So when we open Project Haven for the seniors, we're going to set aside maybe 30 of the beds that are specific for those with the higher medical needs and partner with Circle the City or other medical provider so that those folks can stay there. Because we're not really set up, we don't have enough staff or ability to deal with their medical needs. Circle the City has so many beds, but then there are people who are released all the time who have medical needs and they sleep on the streets. We had a guy one time, it's so sad, he came here and he was in a wheelchair. It was at night. This is a couple years ago, and very high needs. We couldn't help him, and there was nowhere for him. I think we were able to get him, or someone was able to get him a hotel for the night. But the stories are really rough.
I'm looking for hands. Anyone else have any questions for Lisa? Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for what you do as Seroptimist too. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The opportunity. All right, I'll sign off now. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us, Lisa.
Thank you. Bye.
So I'll turn it over to Henrietta and Lisa, our co-presidents, in case there's anything else they have.
Lisa?